it's Maureen Muldoon, and today we're on lesson 184. I'm very excited about being able to get to this lesson with you. In this lesson, there is this section at the very end that feels like a reinterpretation of the Our Father. Not that the Our Father needs reinterpretation, but it just feels like maybe a confirmation of it. I also wanted to invite you all out to a Wednesday night Zoom call that I do that covers the text, where if you're interested in studying live, we can make that a possibility by just clicking on the information and registering for the class. I would love to have you join us. It's amazing what can happen when you meet people on Zoom and then you become friends, and it's just, I don't know, I think it's the new frontier. As always, if you like these lessons, go ahead and like it and subscribe and share it with your friends. Speaking of sharing it with your friends, if you want to invite your friends to our Wednesday night class, you're more than welcome. More the merrier. So this lesson is, I think it's like the keys to the kingdom. It's where we begin to walk each other home. It says, the name of God is my inheritance. And what the heck does that mean? We all have different names, and in this lesson it will show us how we've given everything a separate name, but we all have the same last name. And the last name that we all have is the Christ. You know, I'm Maureen the Christ, it's Jesus the Christ, Harry the Christ, Fred the Christ. We are all of this light, and we've just forgotten that. And we've also forgotten that if we all have the same last name, then we're related. And not just related, but we are each one with each other. But until we recognize our total union and Holy Communion, it at least helps us to begin to recognize that we are walking each other back to that union. So section 1 says, or paragraph 1 says, you live by symbols. You have made up names for everything you see. Each one becomes a separate entity, identified by its own name. By this you carve it out of unity. By this you designate its special attributes and set it off from other things by emphasizing space around it. The space you lay between all things, all happenings in terms of place and time, all bodies which are greeted by a name. So, you know, it makes me think of the Genesis story. And in the Genesis story, God asked Adam to name all things. And when he went about naming all things, it's almost like he made meaning of things. And God said, you're in charge of all of the creatures and all of the animals. And I think that we had a misinterpretation of that situation, because we took it to mean like, I'm in charge, I'm large, and I'm in charge of you. And we extended that not just to creatures, but to everyone. You know, you're not doing it the way I want you to do it, and I'm in charge of you. And I think the true interpretation of that is that not just that we're in charge of it, but that we are in charge of each other's care. I'm in charge of caring for you. That's what I'm in charge of. I'm in charge of caring for you. So it's like God went on a date and left us in charge of all of her children. And instead of being like a cool babysitter where we're like, oh, you guys are awesome and I love you and we'll do crafts, we're like, you kids, get to bed early and nobody gets any ice cream. It's like, why? Paragraph 2. This space you see as setting off all things from one another is the means by which the world's perception is achieved. You see something where nothing is, and see as well nothing where there is unity. A space between all things and you. Thus do you think you have given life in separation. By this split you think you are established as a unit which functions with an independent will. So, in naming all things and in thinking about a hierarchy with all things, we begin to relate to all things in a sense of good and bad and judgment. So as opposed to saying like, this doesn't need a name because it's me, it's an extension of me and I know this person as well as I know myself, we begin to make other identities and cause this fracture. So sticking with the Adam and Eve story, there is and again, this is just a mythology, it's just a story that we use to sort of understand the scope of creation. We have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. There's a tree of good and evil, a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They eat this apple, they digest what is really undigestible, and they begin to immediately feel shame. this is where we experience freedom of choice. We're like, God loves us so much that God's like, you can choose between good and evil, or remember there was another tree there. Do you remember what the name of that tree was? It was the tree of life. So you could have the experience of good and evil, where you experience death and birth and death and birth and death and birth 1,000 times. And because we are apparently heirs to Adam and Eve, we have this unfortunate heritage where we believe in death. All along we could have eaten from the tree of life. Now the good news is that we can choose again in this moment to say, I don't believe in hierarchies. I don't believe in a God that believes in death. God gave us the ability to choose free will, to have free will, and in that free will we were allowed to choose not God. God is not death. God could never die. There is no death. But because we chose that idea of, I want to know not just about good, I want to know about evil, we got to experience the lack of life. You know, evil backwards is live. So that's as bad as it can get, is that we get to this stagnant place where there is no life. There is no life being synonymous with creativity. There is no creativity. When God created the animals and humans, and again, this is just a myth, God didn't actually create animals or humans. We created this in a dream. Once we wanted to wrestle with God, you know, God's like, you could go from me and expand from me in a beautiful and audacious and effortless way, or you can experience life without me, and you will have the ability to experience that which is not me, and you will experience pain, suffering, stagnation, and scarcity. And we were like, I think I'll go with door number 2. And God's like, thy will be done. You know what I mean? Like you get to experience that classroom, but we get to choose again. And in choosing again, we get to choose life. God trusts us to make a loving choice, and a loving choice is life. So number 3, what are these names by which the world became a series of discrete events of things ununified, of bodies kept apart and holding bits of mind as separate awareness? You gave these names to them, establishing perception as you wish to have perception be. The nameless things were given names, and thus reality was given them as well, for what is named is given meaning and will then be seen as meaningful, a cause of true effect, with consequences inherent in itself. This is the way reality is made. So this is the way reality is made, means that this reality is made by you. This is not creation. God doesn't see things as separate. God is fluidity with no beginning and no end. And if we want to experience that, we don't have to make it up. We can just allow ourselves to choose that. I know that sounds easy, like, well, if it's so easy, why didn't we choose it? Well, we are very much addicted to our separate experiences. It kind of nods to that in this lesson. This is the way reality is made, by partial vision purposely set against the truth. Its enemy is wholeness. So we are experiencing separateness, and its enemy is wholeness. And that's why the lesson, there is nothing my holiness cannot do, I think it's 37, is so important, because it's like I get to accept my holiness, and from that wholeness and holiness, there's nothing there's no limitations. So anyway, its enemy is wholeness. It conceives of little things and looks upon them, and a lack of space, a sense of unity or vision that sees differently, becomes a threat which it must overcome, conflict with, and deny. So in this separate state of being, we will unfortunately have the experience of seeing monsters under the bed. Like, we'll see all that's evil, because we have amazing imaginations. And for some reason, we love haunted houses and roller coaster rides and dramas and reality shows and playing with sharp objects and fear. You know, for some reason we have, in this separate state of being, we have a fascination of fear. And we still somehow get a thrill out of, like little kids playing with matches. I don't know if you were ever a little kid who played with a book of matches. It was like, you know, and you knew it was wrong, but there was a thrill to it, in the same way that for some reason our ego side of being feels like there's some thrill to the dramas of life, to the fears of life. And we get to decide for ourselves each and every day and every single moment. I live in a safe and beautiful world where people are good and beautiful and holy. I no longer have the need to judge anyone or anything as bad. You know, when you get to the state where you say there are no bad people, bad words, or bad deeds, I know the ego will be like, what are you talking about? Do you not remember Hitler? And fill in the blank of your favorite villain. So now I don't have to remember Hitler, because of course you can't forget Hitler, even though Hitler forgot himself. It does me no good to join with Hitler in forgetting who he really was. So Hitler was somebody's son. Hitler was an extension of God's love that decided to really go into fear and dabble with monsters and haunted houses, and ended up creating that on our earth. So, but I don't have to fear Hitler or judge Hitler. I can simply forgive Hitler and know that he's almost like a gatekeeper to show me what my destructive potential is under the influence of fear, right? So, number 5. Yet does this other vision still remain a natural direction for the mind to channel its perception? It is hard to teach the mind 1,000 alien names and 1,000 more, yet you believe that this is what learning means. It's one essential goal by which communication is achieved and concepts can be meaningfully shared. Ridiculi, okay? Like, we think you have to learn everything, and we are so addicted to knowing everything. And so there's so much for us to learn. There's still, you know, finding new planets and new colors, and our learning will be without end. And we keep searching and searching and searching to know more and to be more and to have more. And it's like right here in this moment is everything that we need. So we could stop. We could stop and we could just be. That would be nice, and a nice and kind and gentle thing to do. Number 6. This is the sum of the inheritance the world bestows upon everyone who learns to think that this is so, and bestows. And this is the sum of the inheritance the world bestows, and everyone who learns to think that it is so accepts the signs and symbols that asserts the world is real. It is for this they stand. They leave no doubt that what is named is there, and it can be seen as it is anticipated. What denies that it is true is but illusion, for it is the ultimate reality. To question it is madness. To accept its presence is proof of sanity. So, it seems the world is real. We have a lot of sensual, physical evidence to convince us that the world is real. And because this illusion of the world seems real, we believe that there is good and evil. Because we see it in the world, as I just pointed out. We see our own personal Hitlers. We must have good and evil if we are going to come from our human nature. Human nature is not natural, it's human nature. It's humans. Humans are very limited. To be human is 5 limited senses that we gather all of this information to us, and we think that that's the be-all and the end-all. This is actually a very limited way of experiencing life. But we think we are the most evolved beings on the planet. and we forget that we're actually not human, you know? We are not these bodies or these personalities or these titles. Don't tell the ego that. because it's very committed to being this in this separate state. And from a separate state, you can't give what you don't have. So from a separate state, you're going to see separate things. That's going to be the way you see the world. Such is the teaching of the world. It is a phase of learning everyone who comes must go through. But the sooner he perceives on what it rests, how questionable are the premises, how doubtful its results, the sooner does he question its effects. The truth is we have nothing to fear. That these things in the world are simply shadow puppets, and the insane thing is our hand is the puppeteer. I know that sounds crazy because nobody wants to take 100% responsibility for this crazy broken world, or the interpretation of it being crazy and broken, but everything is a call for love. It goes on to say, learning that stops with what the world would teach stops short of meaning. In its proper place, it serves but as a starting point for which another kind of learning can begin. A new perception can be gained, and all the arbitrary names the world bestows can be withdrawn as they are raised to doubt. Think not you made the world. Illusions, yes, but what is true on earth and heaven is beyond your naming. When you call upon a brother, it's his body that you make appeal. His true identity is hidden from you by what you believe he really is. His body makes response to what you call him, and his mind consents to take the name you gave him as his own, and thus his reality is twice denied. For you perceive him separate from you, and he accepts his separate name as his. That's why when we say namaste, it's like saying, like, I know who you are. You are nothing short of the Christ light that dwells in all things, and I won't be convinced by this funny meat suit that you seem to be wearing around. It's like an all-day Halloween affair with all of us walking around in these little personnel. I'm playing Maureen. Oh, I'm playing Carol. I'm playing George. It's like we're not really any of those things. We are Christ consciousness. You know, God says to say, I am that I am. You know, but I don't want to be one with everything. When I look out at the world and I say, I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. Means that everything that I see is also part of me. And so when you go about your day, you could say, that guy is such a jerk. And the only way to make this statement true is to add, me too. That guy is so beautiful. Me too. That guy is so funny. Me too. You know, because we're all one with each other. And what we decide to see in our brother, if we judge it, we withhold the ability of healing it. So, I don't want to be that, we say. We say, I don't want to be that. And we say, I want to judge that. And I can either be a human judger or a human being. And I'm a human being. Like, we can take the experience of the unnatural state of humanness and we can make it holy by simply being. And that's why all of the philosophies and theologies say, be still. Move yourself away from this physical identity. Move yourself into this holy experience. Human beings allow themselves to experience being in love with each other and experiencing that unity with all that there is. So, though it's not natural to be necessarily human, it's holy to be a human being. I don't know, that's just something I'm hearing myself say for the first time, so maybe it's true. Number 9, it would indeed be strange if you were asked to go beyond all symbols of the world, forgetting them forever. Yet we're asked to take a teaching function. You have need to use the symbols of the world a while, but be you not deceived by them as well. They do not stand for anything at all, and in your practice it is this thought that will release you from them. They become but means by which you can communicate in ways the world can understand, but which you recognize is not the unity where true communication can be found. So it's basically saying, like, use words like only to direct the attention to the wordless state of love. So use words, like don't get all weird with each other. And of course Miracles actually says that we say God is and cease to speak. So it is saying that we can get to the place where we cease to speak the words and symbols of this world. words will melt away and float away, and it'll just be the wordless state of God's love, which is too audacious for words. And that's why A Course in Miracles doesn't attempt to teach about love, because love is an experience that can't be taught. You remove all the blocks to love, and you will experience that state of love. You probably already have. It's unconditional love. It's not based on anything happening to you. It's just a indescribable state of bliss, stemming from the foundation of peace. So it's not like the law of attraction, like feel good, get your vibes up. It's not that, unfortunately, because we can all do that really easily. It's actually rests on the foundation of peace. And people will say, peace? Who needs peace? I think often about how we have this huge budget for defense, this huge budget for war, and we've never really allocated much funds for peace, but this is where we're at. Number 10, thus what you need are intervals each day in which the learning of the world becomes a transitory phase, a prison house from which you go into the sunlight and forget the darkness. Here you understand the word the name of God has given you, the one identity which all things share, the one acknowledgement of which is true, and then step back to darkness, not because you think it real, but only to proclaim its unreality in terms which still have meaning in the world that darkness rules. So this is saying you're going to take breaks throughout the day to just be still and remember the truth of your being, and then you go back into the world. Now, why the hell do you want to go back into the world? Because you're here to be helpful. That's why. Because you're here to be helpful. And you can be of great helpfulness when you connect first with your own divinity. Number 11, use all the little names and symbols which delineate the world of darkness. Yet accept them not as your own identity. The Holy Spirit uses all of them, but He does not forget creation has but one name, one meaning, and a single source which unifies all things within itself. Use all the names the world bestows on them, but for convenience, yet do not forget they share the name of God along with you. God has no name. So God has no name, that's interesting, but I like to say that God's favorite nickname is love. Anyway, God has no name, and yet His name becomes the final lesson that all things are one, and at this lesson does all learning end. All names are unified, all space is filled with truth's reflection, every gap is closed and separation healed. The name of God is the inheritance He gave to those who chose the teaching of the world to take the place of heaven. And in our practice, our purpose is to let our minds accept what God has given as the answer to the pitiful inheritance you made as fitting tribute to the Son He loves. No one can fail who seeks the meaning of the name of God. Experience must come to supplement the world, but first you must accept the name for all reality and realize the many names you gave its aspects have distorted what you see, but have not interfered with the truth at all. One name we bring into our practice, one name we use to unify our sight. So, God is, God is, God is, God is, God is. I mean, that's basically the Cliff Notes. 14, and though we use a different name for each awareness of an aspect of God's Son, we understand that they have but one name, which He has given them. It is this name we use in practicing, and through its use all foolish separations disappear, which kept us blind, and we are given strength to see beyond them. Now our sights are blessed with blessings. We can give as we receive. And then it ends with this prayer. So if you want to get your book out and read it along with me, you can do that. Paragraph 15. Father, our name is yours. In it, we are united with all living things, and you who are their one creation. What we made and call by many different names is but a shadow we have tried to cast across your own reality, and we are glad and thankful we were wrong. All our mistakes we give to you that we may be absolved from all effects our errors seem to have, and we accept the truth you give in place of every one of them. Your name is our salvation and escape from what we made. Your name unites us in the oneness, which is our inheritance and peace. Amen. (184). Don't need no more, but of course we're going to have some more, because these are really great lessons and reminders to move into our holy state. And again, I really feel like this is the moment where we begin actually walking each other home to our true identity. So, thank you for letting me share. I so appreciate that there's so many wonderful teachers and so many wonderful students and so many people who are open to receiving these concepts and these principles, and not just open to receiving them, but to implementing them and to embodying them. If you have a chance, don't just read through this lesson, tear the page out and eat it. God bless. Namaste.